So I'm going to take speaker's privilege and talk a little bit about what's going on at the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, as well as talk a bit about what's going on with the UP Energy Task Force. So I wanted to start off by reaffirming for all of you something that I think many of you are aware of. At Eagle, we take our mission very seriously. Our mission to protect Michigan's public health and environment. And to meet that mission, we focus on three primary goals. The first is the mission itself, so protecting public health and the environment. The second is strengthening public participation and trust in Eagle's work. And I think you've probably seen that through the reorganization of the department and in a variety of the offices that we've created, and hopefully you've seen it in some additional outreach that we've been working to do. And our third goal is to invest in our team and in technology so that we can better represent our 10 million residents and better provide the services and the work that we do to help them as well we're protecting public health and the environment. So hopefully those aren't surprising to you. It's really how we keep ourselves focused and how we make sure, to Brian's point, that we make sure that we have that path lit forward for ourselves to know where we're going. So in the challenging times that we find ourselves in, I just wanted to take a quick mention and say that I am very concerned about where the COVID numbers are going. I'm really pleased that Groundworks was able to put this together with the fantastic planning committee to make sure that we're keeping the virtual conversation going, because we can't stop everything by any means. But we are really very watchful of those numbers. And I want to say, first of all, to those of you that are tuning in from the UP, paying a lot of attention to what's going on in your neck of the woods, and just wanting to hoping that everyone's taking good care of each other. What our team has done in the meantime is we've been set up in a teleworking environment. That doesn't mean everyone is teleworking. It means that a large proportion of us are. Our labs, of course, are still in operation, and we continue to do inspections and work like that. The agency has done a fantastic job with the transition to telework. I will say that the statewide hiring freeze continues to be a bit of a barrier for us, which is certainly necessary because of what's going on with budget and because of the continued uncertainty. However, it does increase workload as we lose people to attrition throughout the course of the last few months. And as I know is probably true for all of you, the workload is not going anywhere in the meantime. So we worry about certainly those increasing COVID case numbers and what that means to all of us. But most importantly, we worry about what it means to our residents and to the people that we serve, and then how it can impact the work that we do. So just wanted to give a brief nod to that up front. So this is your daily reminder to wear your mask and wash your hands and keep 6 feet from each other. So before I switch it over to climate and energy work, I did want to take a minute and just mention another one of the governor's announcements in the last few weeks, which is the My Clean Water Plan. So the My Clean Water Plan aligns $500 million in federal dollars, state bonding authority, and existing and prospective state revenues to create a comprehensive water infrastructure package to support communities in every corner of Michigan. The idea is that this would enable job creation, obviously protecting public health and improving environmental quality at the same time. We really appreciate the bipartisan bicameral support already that we've had for this project. As everybody on the line knows, we all care about water in Michigan. Water quality in our beautiful Great Lakes are near and dear to all of our hearts. And so there's been a lot of support for helping communities take the steps that they need to take to improve their water infrastructure. And, we talk a lot in the state about a disinvestment in infrastructure that's happened over the last decades. And one of the pieces of infrastructure you don't see is the water infrastructure, which is why we think this is so important and such a critical way to spend dollars on behalf of communities. So the plan addresses urgent infrastructure issues, including undersized sewers, failing septic systems, unaffordable water rates, and protection from lead, PFAS, and other contaminants that show up in our drinking water so often. EPA estimates that with every $1 million invested in water infrastructure, that creates 15 jobs. So this package could also be a major boost to Michigan's economy as we come out of this global pandemic, which I hope we're coming out of this global pandemic at some point soon. So the $500 million in investment shakes out to $207 million investment in drinking water systems, and then $293 million investment on the wastewater side, or the source water protection. When we look at the drinking water side, our goals are to assist disadvantaged communities with some of their lead line removal costs, address PFAS impacted systems and neighborhoods, and then support communities investing in substandard infrastructure with appropriate asset management plans. On the wastewater side, we're working to eliminate sewage discharge, provide financial support to struggling small wastewater systems, address failing septic systems, and to continue to support that asset management planning that is so critical as we get to investment. So just wanted to take, again, speaker's prerogative and share a little bit about an outside issue, but one that is just so important to all that we do. And I know that you all see it like I do, where climate, energy, and water come at this really important nexus where they're very much interwoven. So switching over to climate. Many of you are familiar with the governor's climate executive order. She set a bold goal for Michigan to reach economy-wide carbon neutrality by 2050 with an intermediate goal of 28% below 1990 emission levels by 2025. So the My Healthy Climate Plan has a variety of different pieces, and I'll just focus on a couple for now, but happy to talk more about some of the other components at another time. So one of the big pieces from the EGLE perspective is the Michigan Climate Solutions Plan. We'll serve as the organizing body for a council that is 14 stakeholders and then representatives from departments within state government who will build that action plan and make sure that the outlined goals will be met within the specified timeline. Now, in order to get to a plan like that, we're going to have really robust and regular conversation with stakeholders across Michigan. And we're working into that schedule a variety of public engagement conversations so that we can get good input because we all know that climate is local. We're also going to have a lot of engagement with our friends at the legislature because this is an executive order and there's a lot of policy mechanisms that work through statute. And so there's going to have to be a lot of really important back and forth so that it's informed by what's going on at the legislature. We all know too that policy is no good without action. So one of the programs that EGLE's putting into place that it starts next week is called Catalyst Communities. In Michigan, so much is happening at the local level and so much of climate is local. And so the idea is to support the capacity that we're already seeing at the municipal and local governments, just thinking about work happening in the Upper Peninsula and, for example, where Marquette has been going is just a fantastic example. So how do we support communities that are doing that type of work and elevate and aggregate their work, but then also give communities that are interested in engaging a place to go so that they can learn more about what climate solutions might look like in their neck of the woods. It's important that this look different because all 83 counties look different. And so we have to be able to meet communities where they're at. So we're very excited about this Climate Communities program. Again, it kicks off, I think it's on the 19th. So go and check out on our website if you're interested in that, or let me know. Actually, maybe I'll put a URL in the chat. So we're very excited about this opportunity to amplify and elevate that work. Now, climate is important because in Michigan, back to President Newland's comment, mobility is important. We are the advanced mobility state. And as part of that, we all know that climate emissions, in Michigan, power generation is still the largest in our climate emissions. However, in the transportation emissions surpassed power generation on a more macro scale in terms of where emissions come from. So mobility has to be part of the solution. And Michigan is a part of the mobility solution. So we think that this is a really critical place for Michigan to lead. So mobility solutions will be climate solutions. When we look at advanced mobility, the solution is going to be shared, connected, autonomous, and electrified. And all of that's going to happen on an electrified chassis, We're seeing targets and goals being set in other nations that are certainly leading where this industry is going. And there's a lot of momentum that you've seen just in the last few weeks, frankly, from announcements from automakers. So it's critical that as we take these climate steps, we see how they connect to mobility, and we are able to envision that bigger solution. Another thing I'll mention on climate before I switch over to the UP Energy Task Force is how important coordination across state government has been. So while I'm sharing with you what Eagles talked about, what the governor's talked about, there are so many pieces that are happening in different parts of state government. So just a couple of examples. One is at DTMB, they're working on a Lead by Example program that is built on a foundation that's been ongoing, frankly, for years. So they're looking at what can state government do? How do we make sure that state government is leading by example? Again, like the charge that President Newland laid out in front of us. We're also seeing programs like that at Treasury, where Treasury is working on a program to support communities as they transition. So the conversation today allows a very exciting discussion about where might energy deployment help support my community from an economic base. There are communities in the state where we're closing down plants as we're transitioning to new types of energy that are having the opposite conversation, which is how does my tax base look now that I'm losing this major component of it? And so I think it's important, I'm sure Sarah will say, because she always does when she does her panel presentation, that all energy has pros and cons. All of it does. And so it is also along a spectrum. And so we're having those discussions within Treasury. So how do we help communities as they're working through that transition? So that's another program. And there's a variety of other programs across state government, but just wanted to mention kind of a couple up top that connected to the conversation that this group's having this afternoon. So moving over to the UP Energy Task Force, I want to say at the outset, a huge thank you to those that participated in the planning committee here, and then also to those that are on the line, and UP Energy Task Force members who might not be on the line or have been on the planning committee. A huge thank you to them. It has been a lot of work, and these people who are participating and giving of their time and energy, you know, it's not their day job, and they are taking a lot of time out of their calendars to offer up their expert opinion. And I would invite you, if you haven't looked at the work of the task force yet, please consider checking out michigan.gov/UP Energy Task Force. Our meetings are recorded. You can find slides and previous presentations, etc. We do also take public comment at all the meetings, and that has a tendency to kind of ebb and flow, but we are always interested in that, either through the video, you can participate by phone, you can certainly email in comments as well. And I would say, just connecting back to one of the goals that I mentioned at the outset, which is increasing and enhancing our communication. In the time of COVID, we've actually seen a huge uptick in participation in our virtual meetings, which, you know, I think is a compliment to folks that are really trying to get involved and using this as an opportunity to connect in, again, through the phone, through webinar, whatever that might be. We have to keep at the core of what we do an expansion of broadband across this state so that we're enabling people to participate through those mechanisms. We also have to make sure that we're reaching out to people through a variety of mechanisms. That being said, it's been a big uptick in the last few months, one that I'm really grateful for, because I think we get to better inform decisions with more input. So, UP Energy Task Force. Just to set the table for those who may not have been engaged in those conversations so far, the charge that was set before the task force, which was created June 2019, number one, to assess UP's overall energy needs and how they're currently being met. Number two, formulate alternative solutions for meeting UP energy needs with a focus on security, reliability, affordability, and environmental soundness, including but not limited to alternative means to supply the energy sources. And third, identify and evaluate potential changes that could occur to the energy supply and distribution in the UP, the economic, environmental, and other impacts of such change. So that's what sits in front of this group. The task force produced a report at the beginning of this year, 2020, that was focused specifically on propane. So we pulled out one component of the energy profile of the UP and focused on it for the upfront first phase of the report. So that included 10 meetings, including 8 where we were able to do them in the UP before we were sadly no longer allowed to go north. And there were a variety of recommendations that came out of that. And so again, would direct you to the website to pull that down and take a look at it. Just as a really high overview, the group looked at storage capacity. So how could we use storage for propane to help balance out the load in the Upper Peninsula? Supply infrastructure. So how do we receive propane through all the various sources, and what might we want to think about to diversify that? A monitoring of market conditions. There was a really big challenge a few years ago when a bunch of kind of tsunamis managed to crest all at the same time, which made it even trickier in the middle of a polar vortex. So how do we try to get some visibility into what's going on in the market so that we're, you can never predict the future, but do our best to be prepared. The fourth component was assistance programs. How can we improve those programs to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to protect our low income customers? State contracting for propane, leading by example, is a critical component. How do we figure out what the state can do on its own based on what it purchases? And then consumer protection. So what might there be able to be done within those statutes? So we're working on now the second phase of the UP Energy Task Force, which is coming back out to the 50,000 foot level and looking at across the Upper Peninsula, what are the challenges for energy resources. So what we've talked about in 2020, starting in May, we backed up into an Energy 101 with an introduction to the UP energy market. We had presentations on energy providers, the territories in the UP, comparison of rates. Obviously, rates and cost are one of the critical foundations of this conversation. And then other recent changes within statutes and how those have impacted that profile. In June, we focused on the electric transmission systems and had an overview from ATC, and then Kathy Cole from the Public Service Commission kind of filled in the other pieces. In July, our topic was electric utilities and their role serving residents, UP residents and businesses. So we had a great presentation by one of our members, Mike Furmansky, with the City of Escanaba. And then Tom Carpenter spoke for Marquette Board of Water and Light on Marquette Utility Services. And then Brett French presented on UPCO. In September, we continued that topic and had presentations from Cloverland, and then a presentation switching over to how do we start thinking about knitting all of these disparate challenges together, and that presentation on how do we combine what we had heard was given by Douglas Jester from Five Lakes Energy. And then in October, we had an overview of the energy survey and renewable energy options in the UP that was done by Sarah, Dr. Mills, who will be joining you later this morning, or later this afternoon, sorry, what time of day is it? And then in our last session that was just last week, Chairman Scripps presented both on integrated resource plans and how do the IRPs, what point are the IRPs at, how do they influence what happens across a singular peninsula, and then also existing financing tools for the type of energy deployments that the task force had been talking about. So, this conversation today is uniquely positioned to be able to give opportunities and ideas back into the UP Energy Task Force feed. So as I said, presentations and comments coming in through those meetings would be very much appreciated. And of course, connecting it all back to what are the needs for the Upper Peninsula? So how do we deal with those challenges? I will say that things have been shifting in terms of cost from an overview perspective and what's going on, broadly across the UP, cost continues to be that one foundational concern that comes up over and over again. How do we support particularly low income customers, but even more generally, peninsula residents because of the challenge of cost in certain jurisdictions. And of course, this group knows much better than I do. The geography of the Upper Peninsula can be challenging just in terms of the spread out nature of the population base that you're serving. And then certainly the fragmentation of the energy service providers. You know, in the Upper Peninsula, I think we've got 13, 15 different energy providers, as opposed to the Lower Peninsula, where we've got obviously two dominant ones, and then, you know, a variety of munis and co-ops, but it's much more, it's less fragmented in that way. So it opens itself up to a different level of service from that perspective. So, so the task force continues to struggle with those types of challenges, and definitely is interested in additional feedback, you know, from folks like this and from other sources in order to better inform what we're doing. So one of the topics that comes up in the course of the UP Energy Task Force conversations that looks like will be something that gets discussed this afternoon too, is additional electrification, particularly, again, back to Brian's comments, you know, might there be further deployment of EV infrastructure and EV charging? And so at Eagle, we've been doing work on thinking about what does that infrastructure profile look like. So from a state perspective, you know, we want to make sure that we're enabling, but we don't want to necessarily be the only one with skin in the game. So how do you put together public-private state partnerships so that you can see deployment in key locations? So one of the things that was invested in a couple of years ago was an overview of the whole state with a EV modeling scenario. So how do you look at, with light duty vehicles getting on the roads, what would likely be the pathways that those light duty vehicles would travel? And then what type of infrastructure, so charging stations, what kind of charging do you need in order to support that? And I think that, you know, that work is really instructive so that as we start to think about higher density of electric vehicles on the roadways, what is the infrastructure that you start with that is state supported along with a private partner, so that there's multiple entities with skin in the game. But you want to make sure you're, you know, really incenting the private network to take off. And so that work has been done through Eagle and then earlier iterations, and I think is a really useful way to help us build that foundation and to think about what type of deployment is necessary. And then, of course, along with when you're talking EV infrastructure, you also have to talk, you know, not only the charging stations, but then also kind of what's the wrap around there. So what is that business model going to look like? And then what type of technology is necessary to enable it? And, you know, those are places where, again, we're trying to help kind of support the innovation models so that they have an opportunity to take off from there. And, you know, we can kind of see where it goes. So I wanted to share kind of all those pieces. And again, huge compliments to the folks that are participating in the UP Energy Task Force. As we look forward, there's another meeting that's scheduled right now in December. It's December 15th. We're working to put together the agenda for that discussion. And then, you know, we are moving into the recommendation phase that will parallel what we did last year with at the end of the year and then into 2020. So that we can meet our goal of getting the governor report in Q1 2021. So again, feeling like it moves fast, but it's been super well informed by all the really smart people that are participating and giving of their time to enable the work of the UP Energy Task Force. And then if I go back to wear my other hat for a second from an Eagle perspective, as I mentioned, you know, we're working really to increase our communications and increase our engagement with communities. So I'll make sure to share that Catalyst Communities link. But then I would also invite you to spend time on our website and look at, we've built out a new blog Actually, it's been ongoing for a little over a year now. So it's michigan.gov/MI, my environment. I know we all overuse the MI, but hey, we're Michigan, so we can do it. And on my environment, what we've been working to do is put together some of the stories and the work that Eagle's doing that might not be hitting the press. And so I would invite you to go take a look at that. One of the things that we profiled recently that I'm really excited about is an opportunity to support COVID testing in wastewater treatment plants. And in fact, we've been partnering in the Upper Peninsula. I suspect many are aware of the really great work that's happening at Michigan Tech here. And so this gives us an opportunity to have a better understanding about what the COVID profile looks like in a community from watching the wastewater treatment plant. And there's work going on in the public health arena to say that, this is another component to our signals and our insight to help us better gauge and understand where we're seeing outbreaks and how the outbreaks are shaking out. And what other types of public health resources might we be able to bring. So the Eagle team's been really excited about that project, and you can see more about it on the My Environment website. But there's a variety of other pieces there too that hopefully you would all find useful. So with that, I know that I have a few more minutes on the slot, but Rochelle said that we could do some Q&A too, and I'm not looking at the Q&A, but I'm guessing you might have a couple of questions for me. So I'll go back to the screen and see Rochelle's got her mute off, so I think that's a good sign.